am lucky that I'm able to talk to such a wonderful generation of young people like you. It's took me a long, long time to have the guts to talk about it, but thank you for having me. And one day, it was I think in August, or even the end of July, he just told to my parents, how about if I will take all 3 of the kids and bring to my farm, let them rest, because we live far away in a forest, we don't have no neighbors, nobody will know who they are, and I will play with his little boy because I was the same age, and and then maybe the time will get better and he will bring us back.
How old were you?
I was about 7.5 or 8, something like this.
Did you ever go back to visit your parents?
No, I never saw them again, because it's right away was in end of September, I think the high holiday approached, and my brother and my sister told me that they are going home back to the family. They are not going to celebrate Rosh Hashanah in non-Jewish place, and they have to be family. And because I was so little, they would not take me. I yelled and screamed and cried, but didn't help me, because they knew that they have to go through the forest, through the rivers, through the mud, because they will not. They were afraid to walk the 20 miles on the highway, and not to encounter Germans.
Right.
I never saw them again. I never saw my family again. That was the last time.
How did you feel when you realized that you would never see them again?
At first, I didn't know that my family is not alive. It took another few weeks. And happens to be that his wife, Noni, she went to visit a grave of her little boy who died many years ago. And this Catholic cemetery was on the top, and there was a big ravine on the bottom. And suddenly, she and all other people who were in the cemetery were ordered by the Nazis and by the soldiers and police. They may not move, they have to stay there, because there is something goes on in the city. And she and all the other people saw what went on. She saw they were bringing Jewish people and shooting them. And the same very day, 4,500 young and old people were slaughtered.
4,500?
4,500. You went and you stole the rotten potatoes, you stole the rotten carrots, because that's what left in the field. Sometimes you stole an egg, or maybe some in the garbage, something, and that's how you survived.
How did the Jewish agency find you?
But there were a lot of high-ranking Jewish soldiers who remained after the war in Europe. And they dedicated their life to find Jewish kids. And they spent lots of months and years. And you know, when you go and you know your neighbor had only 2 kids and suddenly they have 3 kids, they start to ask around, who is the third one? She doesn't look like, I didn't have blue eyes and blonde hair. They had. Who is the kid there? So they start to suspect. And then they started to talk to the people who hold you. And finally the people told them, yes, she is a Jewish child, but she's no more Jewish, she is a Catholic now. And we are not going to give her, unless her relatives will come. Well, they were very brave men and women, and they find a way that when nobody was home, they just came and took you. And just throw blankets on you and put in a car and transferred you to a station, but maybe about 200 miles. And they took you to a big city in Poland. It's an industrial city near Krakow, Lodz. And there was already a Jewish orphanage home with a lot of Jewish kids.
Do you have a different view on life since you were in the war?
Yes. First thing, overcome hate, don't hate. Because negative things brings negative outcome. And I, as a youngster, even when I was 15 or 16-year-old or even younger, I decided that I am not going to dwell on my past. I am going to achieve something in my life. And I'm going to try to convince all young people to study. And because I was so far away from Judaism and I hated Judaism, because I thought Judaism brought all the tragedies in my life, I came back just with the same zest to my Jewish tradition as I left. I realized it was not the fault, and that has nothing to do with my God. My God did not come down wherever God is and said that's what should happen to me. And I strongly believe that each one could make themselves whatever they want to be. If they really work, be honest, be faithful to their religion, be missionary for their religion, and not to neglect. And you know, we have a beautiful, beautiful tradition. Jewish tradition teaches us values, ethics, and tikkun olam. And always think positive.
But in the course of all this, our apartment building where we were staying was bombed. We were in the cellar with all the people that would go down to the cellar when there was an air raid.
All non-Jews?
All non-Jews, right. And the reason it was safe then, because there was so much commotion in the city that nobody knew who anybody was. There were a lot of people from other areas coming in with their relatives, and wherever there was a place to stay, people would share, because the city was getting bombed out altogether. So the bomb hit our house, and half of it was totally destroyed. We came out, and it was the half we lived in. And it was just rubble everywhere. You know, you couldn't see a building. It was only a half a building of ours. And there were lots of other people on the streets that got bombed out too. And so people started to live on the street. And during that time, the Germans took over because they were eliminating all the men from the city because they were afraid that those were the people who would fight them. So they would again have a segregation where men and women were sent out of the city and the men were sent to labor camps. And so during that, before the Germans came to the section where we were on the street, the nuns would come with hot cocoa for the children to make them feel good, you know. My mother would never let me go to get the hot cocoa because she thought I shouldn't be away from her for a minute, you know. And I would nag her and nag her and nag her till one day she says, "Go already." So I went to get in line to get the cocoa. I stood in line, and a couple of boys, about 11 and 12, came by, and they said, "Get out of line, we want your spot." I said, "No, I was here first." So they said, "Get out of line, we want to go there." I said, "No." So one of them said, "You're a Jew girl, aren't you?" I said, "No, why do you say that?" He said, Jew girl, and they started to sing, both of them, real loud, and I got really upset. And I started to cry. And then the more they did it, I got out of line, and I didn't know this, but there was a German officer way far away watching all this, you know. And when I started to cry and got out of line and started to walk away, I heard him say, "Halt," and that means stop in German. when I heard that, I got really scared, so I started to run. And when I ran, he shot me. And I didn't know I was shot because it doesn't really hurt at first, because you don't feel, your nerves are shattered, so you don't feel pain. So I went like this because my leg felt really hot, and there was blood all over my hands. So I realized that I must have been hurt. And so I thought, I better run away from where my parents were, because if a German shot me, I don't want them involved. So I knew that there was a place where they were hiding some tools and old things that did repairs with. And there was a man that took care of the shed, and I ran into the shed, and there was straw on the floor, so I hid under the straw. And I lay there real quietly. I saw the German come into the doorway, and he looked around, and he didn't see me, I guess, because he left. And I was really afraid to come out because I didn't know if he was waiting for me outside. And maybe I even fainted because I don't remember, but it was dark when I woke up, and I heard some rustling. And I saw the man that took care of the shed that my father knew, and I called him over. He said, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" And I said, "Please go and get my parents." So he went to get my parents, and they came, and of course they saw that I was wounded. And they brought a nurse who had some hydrogen peroxide, and she cleaned my wound and bandaged me, and I couldn't walk. So my father had to carry me everywhere.
How long was it until you were willing to talk about your story?
Oh, it seems forever, not till I was like 60. It's very strange, but I really didn't want to talk about it. I guess I always wanted to be like my daughter. She always wanted to be like everybody else, and so did I. I didn't want to be different. But at 60, I somehow had to go back and find out really, I wanted to read about everything about the time when I was in Europe, when the war was there. And I started to read all the stuff about it. And then I started to talk about my experience too.
Was it difficult when you started to talk about it?
At first, yes. Then I became much more accustomed to it. And today, I don't know why I feel so soft inside. A lot of things triggered me off.
The problem was that in the camps, I lost faith. Not just me, but some other people. We lost faith. We were angry with God. We were angry with God even after the liberation for many years. My wife and her family helped me to go back and accept God again, because I felt personally that we were abandoned by God. And not just felt, but I'm sure that we were abandoned by God. Because where was He when this horrible thing happened?
Do you feel that God could have helped you but didn't?
This I don't know. It's a unique question. This I really don't know. But where was He? Not for myself, but where was He when 2,000 innocent people were hurled into a gas chamber? 2,000 at once. Babies, innocent children, and they were gassed. How is it possible God didn't make some miracle, something? that it would stop it.
Did your family go into the camps with you, or?
Well, the confusion in the train, the separation of families, the most heartbreaking story that you can imagine. We were separated right there from your family, and you never saw your loved ones in life again. My mother was a very young woman, just 39 years old. But I had a little brother, not even 3 years old, Gabi. And they told her to go to this long line, very long line, that they went, the elderly, sick, mothers with their babies, young children. And she was ordered to go to this long line. And I ran after her because I didn't want her to go alone with my little brother. But my father grabbed my arm and he says, no, you are coming with the man, you are a bar mitzvah boy. But they insisted I wanted to go with my mother. I didn't want her to go alone. But my father wouldn't let me go, without realizing that he just saved my life. We didn't know. And we asked those animals, those prisoners, we asked them where they are going, those people. And they said they are going to the children's camp. Well, they went to heaven, but we didn't know it. And thanks God, thanks God that we didn't know it. Because if we would know, they would have had to slaughter us right there. Who would let his mother or his father to go to the gas chambers? Everything was done secretly. And then we were already far. They spotted us, my mother with my little brother, and they waved to us and we waved them back. And this was the last time. It's all right. This is always very hard, especially when I'm talking to my grandmother. I found out that I have no parents, and I have no brothers, and I have no close relatives. And from 39 people that we went into the camps, I was the only survivor, orphan at age of 14, and a very difficult life ahead of me. So this was the homecoming.
Wow. After you were liberated, has the Holocaust affected the way, like, you live, like, after you were liberated?
Definitely.
What
Definitely. I was a very lost child.
Like, what event really changed you?
You are coming home, and you all of a sudden you have to agree with it, realize that you are alone in this entire world. 14-year-old. How are you going to survive? So of course everything changed. It was much better in the camp, mentally, than at home. Over there you had the hope. Here was the fact. You are alone, this is it, and you have to try to do the best of it.
How did you get a job? Like, how did you eat?
Well, the Czechoslovakian government wanted to give me education. But how can I go to school when I'm confused, lost, completely lost, difficult person. Can I sit in classes? Do I have brain to study when I have think how I'm going to survive? So I had to go to work to get few dollars. I mean, not dollars, but crowns. And then 1947, a miracle happened. State of Israel was born. And this was my dream, to go to Israel, to be a soldier in the Israel army. Because I lost everything and everybody that I had before. So for me, Israel was something very important. I didn't know what is Israel. But I wanted to go there because it's your home, the Jewish home. But I was underage. I was only 17. The Czechoslovakian government wouldn't let me decide because I had to be 18. So some good people overnight made me 19 years old, changed my name, that I was a refugee from Yugoslavia, and they let me go, and I went to the Israeli army as 17-year-old, and I was fighting for the independence war in Israel, which was the greatest thing, because the Israeli army, not because to kill people, I had nothing against the Arabs, but to be a soldier gave you back the strength, the dignity of a human being. And I met friends that they became my family until today from the Israeli army. This was very important. And of course, after the war, I met my beautiful wife. She went through hell from me because I was, like I said, very difficult, almost crazy. Not crazy, but very difficult, lost boy, but she helped me with her family to go through all my hell. So Israel was great for me.
How else did you observe Judaism at home?
Shabbat, every Friday night. My father would pray twice a day, you know, with the tefillin and the talit. And all the holidays, I remember celebrating Passover. The seders were beautiful. And every holiday was celebrated.
Can you describe what your town looked like and what community lived in it?
It was a small town. It was one major street, and I remember a big church at the end of the street. And my cousins and aunt and uncle lived on one side of us, like to the right of our house, and my grandparents to the left of the house, and we could walk to each one of their houses. The attic was about as big as this stage here, and the low ceiling, the tallest person could hardly stand up. And we had straw on the floor, and they brought containers for bathroom use, but we didn't eat very much, so we didn't need those too much. But and there was one small window, very small window, and we couldn't get real close for the fear that someone might see us. But from time to time we looked out and we had some sun streaming in. Wasn't a fancy place.
How did you get food while you were hiding in the attic?
To begin with, Pan Gracholski, Mr. Gracholski would bring up some food, some potatoes, or once in a while some soup. Not meat, because we were kosher, we wouldn't eat the meat. They tried to give us ham, but we didn't eat it. And as time went by, they asked us to leave, and they brought less and less food up. So the adults would leave the attic during the night and go pick fruits from the farm or vegetables. from time to time they would knock on a neighbor's door, but they told them to leave. Once in a while they would give them some cheese and bread, but not very often. We hardly had, we were literally starving. I was skin and bones.
How many people were living in the attic with you?
14. Started out with 16, but my aunt had baby twins, and they were brought in front of a church step. They didn't make it. So then we ended up 14, and then my mother died eventually, and my brother died. So.
Did they die in the attic?
Yes, my brother and my mother died in the attic.
When did you start telling your story?
Well, I started speaking to young people in schools a few years ago, probably about 6 years ago, more, 10 years ago. I would speak in temples and schools, and I've had some, because I'm so inspired. I'm doing it to inspire young people, but I actually get inspired myself by being around young people.